with Dee Dee and my little special guest. Hopefully, this my special guest stays quiet, as quiet as a
He's
newborn can
fine.
stay. This discussion, but we have Dee Dee of Brown Girl Reading here with us, and we are going to discuss Memphis, which was our May general track read by Tara. She corrected us because Naya, who does our TikTok,
It's
said Tara.
Tara. Yeah.
She said Tara. She's like, no, it's the black girl pronunciation. So
Okay, whatever.
Tara Stringfellow is the author of Memphis, and we are going to discuss. Yeah, we're just going to discuss the book overall because there has been a little bit. Is it fair to call it drama?
Oh
Am I
yeah, it's drama.
am I
Mhm.
overstating it that her interaction with Black women book influencers,
It hasn't been good.
yes, it's been less than tasteful.
Yeah.
And when we initially announced the book reading, we announced it, we've been in a bit of disarray because clearly I'm doing this now. Um, yeah, so we announced at the end of April, and when we put it up on social media, that's when, we heard, oh, you should have seen
Yeah.
the
No, she
interactions
was.
I had with people, and I
Yeah.
really don't feel comfortable reading this book, and I'm
Mm.
not going to read it. And so we had already produced the syllabus. We couldn't walk it back. We don't have the means.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. You couldn't walk it back. It was too late. Yeah.
So we did it, and we didn't do any live discussions for it, and we didn't do a lot of promotion for it because of the interaction. And one of her interactions was with Dee Dee. And I'm going to
Mm.
play the Instagram just for reference. I
Oh,
have it pulled up
girl.
here. Oh, oh, you can't fast forward on desktop.
No, you can't.
That's so
Well,
whack.
you know what you can do? Why don't you just put it on another stream so that people can access it, or just put a link where people can
Yeah,
access
we
it.
sent out the newsletter. We put a link in the newsletter. So we put
Yeah.
to chocolate covered
Oh
chocolate book
yeah,
page.
she really had it with her.
Yes, we sent
That was
that
on
email
Twitter.
out.
Yeah.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
we sent a link out to your Instagram.
Mm.
I particularly wanted to play the end of your interview where she does a reading of Memphis because I think your interview is really worth watching because one, it shows like how easy it is in today's age based on like how white the book community is to
Hmm.
produce a book that gets very favorable reviews.
Yeah.
And it's really easy. I'm not trying to really shade any type of reader, but it
Mm-mm.
is very easy. It's easier now to just kind of produce books that hit on a few cliches and that they can evoke feeling, but they have no
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
And
Like the thing is, when I read the book, so I remember watching you on, I think it was on Instagram, and that's how we interacted. Is because you're like, okay, yeah, it's not too bad. I kind of like it. I was like, what? I was like, what you mean? What about this? And what about this? And you were like, oh, okay, I didn't think about that. So the thing is, this book could have been really good. I feel like it would have been very, very good if she would have really gone deeper and dealt with the abuse that she writes in the book, because she writes a lot of abuse. You have the abuse from the main character Joan, you have abuse that happens to her abuser, then you have the abuse that her mother suffers at the hands of her father, then you have the abuse he suffers. There's a lot of, this, how can we break this? That's why I asked her in the thing about black women being free, because she has a whole section in the book about that, where um she says, I can't remember exactly what it is. Let me see if I can find it. But it says, it's like a statement where she says something like, something about black women being free, and it's right around the part where you see how the two sisters, by this time we know that they both have tons of problems, like that they're not even getting close to really like solving the solution. They seem to be making more problems with everything they decide. So the first problem is when I think it's Miriam decides to move back in with her sister because she's leaving her husband. She just got into literally a fist fight. He like punched her in the face and everything. And so she takes her daughters and says, I'm going to go live with my sister in Memphis. And I'm like, girl, your sister's son sexually abused your daughter. What you mean? So I was a little bit like, how are we going to play this out? And then as I was reading and I was realizing, okay, so we're not going to do anything. We're just going to put this young girl in this position where she's feeling like she's in danger and difficulty all the time because she's living in the same house with her abuser. And then the other thing that really burned me was when they arrived there and Miriam says, oh, she won't remember what happened because she was 3. That's what she's thinking in her head. And I'm thinking, what? You really think she's not going to remember just because a white doctor told you she wasn't going to remember because she was only 3? I was like, oh no, this book right here.
I will say I did not read the physical copy of the book. I did Audible, and I typically do Audible in the car.
Yeah.
So I'm driving someplace.
Yeah.
And I feel like had I read the book in my own voice,
yeah, you would have been like,
I would have caught on quicker to like what the Audible, the author, the narrator did a wonderful job.
I heard that the Audible was done very, very well. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I was kind of thinking, okay, well maybe they'll just address it later.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just kept thinking because I was like, okay, well what exactly happened with her and Derek? Is that the boy's name? What did he do to her? Which they don't address until the end of the book.
I think it's something like he penetrates her. I think like.
No, she's raped. Yeah, like, but they don't really say until the end of the book, and then you get that cliche ending of, oh, now he's being raped by this like brute guy in jail. And
and also the thing that burned me about that burned me a lot because it goes against everything that we know about the relationship between abusers and abusees. Is he calls her and basically summons her to the jail. And I'm like, why is she going?
And then we have this mythical Black woman that we never get any development.
Yeah, okay, now that's cliche. Kind of I'm sorry, that's cliche. This whatever that character.
And it didn't dawn on me all these cliches existed until I got to the ending because I kept okay. Also, I think that I did the Audible, so I'm reading it in somebody else's voice. And 2, a good group of Black women said this was a great read. Black women that I trust said, oh, this is a good book. Oh, we should discuss it. Oh, I enjoyed reading it.
Too many cliches for me. I mean, that jail part just got me. It just that just pissed me off when I read that jail thing. Because not only that, he gets her all the way over there. And then he doesn't even say, look, I'm really sorry. I was wrong that I did that to you. I was, something. No, he just tells her, can you send me some drawings? It's a good thing that you do. You're still doing drawings. I was like, what?
And puts her in a role where she's still contributing labor to the person who abused
Absolutely.
her.
And
I just was like, I was really disgusted by the ending of the book.
But this is the reason why she got into a fight with Chocolate Covered Pages, because I love Chocolate Covered Pages. She had said on Twitter, well, the book is not bad, but all the men are trash. So then that's when Tara said, oh, no, you didn't read my book if you think all the men are trash. She's like, okay, all of them except for Myron, but Myron is.
But like Myron has this traumatic ending. Like every woman in the book has this like out of this world traumatic. It's not even like, okay, like daily, like I do think there are Black people that exist in this world who, yes, our Blackness comes with an inherent trauma that the world puts onto us, but who do not exist within, this onslaught of just like stab you in the chest.
Yeah.
Like, are we all raped? Are we all
according to her, yes.
Are we all?
According to the author, yes. That's what she said in my interview. She said everybody, and I think, everybody has it in their family. All women have been subject to, abuse. And, why am I asking her that question? Like, it's dumb, that I'm asking her why she's doing this. So,
You know, it's the Prada headband one that got me. It was just a goofy headband. Like, let me not be
Oh my goodness.
juvenile
Yeah, I mean,
here.
I went in it with my heart and soul, as I do every time a publisher asks me to read a book and interview an author. But this is the first time that someone has treated me like that. And I was hot mad because I spent a lot of time trying to get that interview together, and I had to literally throw out 3/4 of what I wanted to do and in the order I
You did
wanted
a
to do it,
wonderful job. You
because
maintained so well.
she was like not having it. She didn't want to answer none of my questions. Like, nope.
Let me see. Let's see what section we're. I'm gonna add it to the screen just for people that might not have any context. And see where we're at here.
Okay, I see.
Here. Let's see if this works. Okay.
All right, we're back.
Okay, so I was just asking you about, because of the fact that I know there's a lot, when there's abuse in Black families, it's very taboo for us and we don't want to speak about it. And in this book, there's a dynamic that happens that kind of drives the story a little bit, and we are very, I think we're a little worried as the story goes on. Can you tell me what drove you to write about that and to have that as to be one of the essential parts of the story?
I wrote a family story.
Mm-hmm. And so
I don't know that doesn't have abuse in it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it, Black or
Yeah.
white. I don't think it's a Black. I was a
Mm-hmm.
family attorney in Chicago for years. I don't know a family that doesn't have abuse.
Yeah.
Whether that be child molestation, whether that be incest, whether that be neglect just of children, whether it is domestic abuse of women, whether it's marital rape. I don't know a woman on this earth who hasn't been sexually assaulted in some way. Now, whether we talk about it or not, that's the truth.
Yeah. So
I wanted to write a true family story.
Okay, so let's go back to this family story, because this is, I think, essentially a story about women and women's freedom, as you talk a lot about in the story. And because there's that line comes up quite frequently also, is this idea of when Black women can be free. You mentioned that a lot, and there's also the other one, the line that I like the best, which is "I got you, I got you." So when you look at those two lines and the frequentness of them, not only do we talk about Black women being free, but this book has a heavy theme of loneliness. The loneliness that Black women go through because they're trying to either break a family cycle, whatever that is, or because they're having to do everything. They're having to make the money, they're having to support the kids, they're having to. So do you feel like when you were writing this story, this was essentially in the back of your mind all the time, that you wanted to convey this story, this part of the story?
What part of the story?
The idea that Black women Black women are not free, that they have difficulty in being truly free.
I don't think that's the case at all.
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I feel very free. I mean, I don't think about white folk that much at all. Just to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I live in Black City. I'm about to go I have to leave early to go get my hair done by a Black woman who runs her own business. Memphis has the most Black female-owned restaurants and businesses in America, if not the world. You know, I guess I'm spoiled in that way, but I guess I live in a beautiful Black ancient city that's always been supportive of me. And so I've always felt very free, especially living here. I mean, I'm in Memphis. I live in North Memphis.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Okay, I found the phrase. So it's on page 157. Joan, my mom said sharp, reproachful. He's gone, I said. I'm finally safe, free. We all are now. On August, cackle reverberated throughout the yellow kitchen. Felt like it shook the rafters themselves. Free? Her laugh was steeped in the same bitterness when I had asked her about God. A black woman hasn't ever known the meaning of the word, my love. So that was what I was referring to. That, and she writes it and then says the opposite in the interview. So
She doesn't strike me as somebody who is in true community with black women, and it's interesting because at the end you ask her to read a few pages and that she reads it in like this pseudo British voice.
yeah, it was
Were you from Memphis?
It was very disturbing because I was like, what's happening? Why is she yelling? What's going on? Is this, I don't know what kind of theater was going on there, but it was a little disturbing to me because it seemed like every question I asked her, which is written in her book, she says the opposite. So she says, she immediately answered with, I don't care much about what white folks think. And I'm like, you don't care what white folks think, but you're here in my interview and you're citing every white male author you know and love. I was confused.
And then was very excited to be on the Today Show, but wasn't giving, an opportunity with a black woman audience and a black woman, book influencer, and wasn't giving it the respect that she seemed to be ready to give to a major white, television show. And I think this book kind of in the end for me feels like, look, I believe that black mediocrity should be allowed to exist within the art world.
Of course. I mean, it's a free country. It exists.
I try not to expect everything that I, absorb to meet my particular standard.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean,
but this is just, yeah, my babe. The issue with this was it felt like similar to, black TV shows where you could tell they troll Twitter. Like they lurk on Twitter, and they're taking all these conversations from the black Twitter space, but they don't actually have the gravitas to, explore the nuance of the conversation and make it translate into a television or film.
Yeah.
And the book felt very much so like, just especially after watching your interview, just like I went to a grad school program for writing, and I employed all these techniques. And I thought, can I tell a black story that invokes a certain sort of feeling and emotion based on all these techniques without actually respecting the people that I'm writing about?
Yeah, she's writing about her family, apparently. This is supposed to be based off of her family, even though it's fiction. Yeah, so that also can be slightly problematic because in saying that it's fiction, that's like putting a semi-barrier between yourself as an author and the public that reads the book. But then when you go out and you have to do interviews and people ask you about the abuse that's in the book, you can't roll back and just start saying everybody has abuse in their family and not really answering the question and not really talking about, because she sat down and wrote this book. So she must know what she was writing when she wrote it. Why did she write what she wrote? And she's not willing to actually to discuss it.
And so with that, I wonder what kind of labor then does it assume, especially for the audience that shares an identity with the people in the book? What kind of labor then is she placing on the reader? Because I do think that maybe some of us, I don't know, I was having this thought earlier about like maybe people also like the book and can walk away thinking, well, it was an okay book because we're almost kind of trained to insert ourselves into the narrative.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, because
and to kind of build out the landscape that doesn't actually exist in the book.
Well, you've got that aspect, but then you also have the aspect of, a person who has actually been abused and inserts themselves there. And that can have many effects. It can be totally horrible, because it's like the person is then reliving what they're reading because they're reading too much, trauma. or it can just be a way of the reader feeling sympathetic to all the characters in the book that are abused, as well as maybe even feeling sympathy towards the author for writing it, knowing that it is based on her family. We don't know to what extent it's based on her family, but we do know that it is based on her family. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the level of abuse in the book is kind of high because
it's obscene.
yeah,
Honestly,
it's
taking
not.
your young child back to the seat to live in the house
Yeah,
with the person who raped
yeah,
her, and everybody has a deep loving connection, but nobody addresses
yeah.
it.
It's kind of hard to, for me, it was kind of hard to swallow that part of it, because it's almost like the book ended and this poor girl didn't get 1 ounce of therapy, was only traumatized from day one all the way through. And her mom is clueless, completely clueless to what she should. There's even one moment where she says, "Am I a bad mother?" I was like, yes. I was like, yes.
And then it's interesting because we have this very robust aunt and this guardian in August,
Mhm.
right? Who kind of comes across as that sort of like radical down, but she's also the mother of a rapist.
Yeah, and
who then like
and soon to be
coddles
a
the
murderer as
rapist.
well, because he murders somebody at the end and winds up going to jail. So she's failed as
Yeah,
well.
and it's just so, and there's never any sort of contention held with these violent acts that happen within the family. Like, we don't even really get contention with Jackson,
No.
who's an abusive husband who just pops back up, and then I'm sorry, this is mad spoilers.
Yeah,
August
he
fucks
pops
his
up, but
brother.
then she does it. She kind of makes it so that it's convenient for him to pop up, because she throws in 9/11. That's another thing. She throws in some key historical events to somehow add a layered backdrop to her story. So there's 9/11 is mentioned. Then we have the sanitary worker strike in Memphis in 1968. We have that in the background
Yeah.
as well. And we also have a little bit of the background that we know that her husband went to war, and he came back all messed up. So she uses a 9/11 because her husband works in the Pentagon, I think, if I remember correctly. So she uses that as a catalyst to get Jax, the husband, to come back into their lives. It's kind of I mean, okay, I'm not mad at it, but I'm just like, do we really need to do that? I don't know. Because he comes back and nothing really gets properly resolved. It's almost like it's partially resolved. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think even the historical notes that you're hitting on, right? So I'm in grad school. My area of research, my dissertation or thesis rather, will be on Memphis post 1970, right? Because most of the civil rights history stops with the sanitation worker strike in 1968. Then a couple of weeks after that, we have the
exactly. And she mentions it in the book
Memphis as well. Yeah. So you get like the very white people tropey notes about civil rights, about Black history, but being a person from Memphis and having part of your book also cover like they had this mayor, I think his name was Crump.
Yeah.
Who was like a big stick, very violent white mayor. There's an entire history around how that shapes Memphis, and particularly the Black Memphis community. You know, the Kojic Church is founded in Memphis. There's huge cultural notes that are very, very specific to Memphis. And I feel like to name a book Memphis, to have it rooted in Memphis, and only name these cliche historical notes.
Well, you see, this is the problem at the moment with some of the books that are coming out, by some Black authors. And I don't blame necessarily the authors. I'm gonna blame the publishers. Okay, because when you come in with your manuscript and they start to read it, and you can bring in the blackest book you want to bring, they're gonna kind of gloss it over to make it, palatable for the, for white folks, because they feel like white folks won't read a real Black book. And so I feel like that's when I was reading it, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh God, here we go. We got to hear the sanitation workers strike again. Oh no, we got to hear 9/11 again. Oh no, we got to hear about MLK. it's always the same things, and that's how that it's almost like it's a common thing that happens in books when they want to put in a historical incident. Then they're going to put in one of those very common ones that we are probably pretty tired of hearing about, because they arrive systematically in a lot of books, and she puts it in there. So I don't know if she had originally put that in there, or if they told her to put that in there because it would make it more palatable or whatever. I don't know, but I feel like they were looking for something to break up the abuse, because this book is not long at all.
When it comes to abuse, so we read Queenie.
Oh
at the
Lord, that's
first year that
another
we
one of
ran
my
the
not
book
so
club.
favorites.
And Queenie was very polarizing. Some
Very.
people loved the book, but some people disliked, and that's kind of why I gave Memphis a chance, because a lot of people that dislike Queenie were like, "Oh, I like Memphis."
I didn't like Memphis, and I didn't like Queenie.
And I was kind of like, all right, well, y'all said Queenie was trauma dumping, so maybe Memphis, I was not expecting this sort of onslaught of trauma to be dumped onto us in Memphis. And, if I was to give Tara her flowers, I think that she employs a technique, and if that was her goal, she accomplished the goal,
That's what
right?
I was going to say, but I don't know.
I don't know what
let's
say that again. Well, I mean, per her interview, it was just that she had all these writing techniques based on the great white men of the literary world, and she wanted to see if she could successfully employ them, and she did it.
Yeah, could she do it?
At a very base level. Yeah, we also read Luster in the book club,
I read that too. I liked Luster, though.
I liked Luster. Luster is just a mess.
Yeah,
but
the
I
writing
like
in Luster is really good. That lady
and
can write.
We get very developed characters in Luster. It might not. There's books that might not go the way we want them to go.
I agree. I like
but
Luster.
I think they give a lot more, and that might complicate, the way we think fiction characters
behave,
should live their lives, and the sort of non-perfect characters.
A lot of people said in Luster she needed some black friends. She needed some black girlfriends.
She needed black friends. She needed Luster I really enjoy, and I liked we just read your Akweke Yemize's, what is it?
You made a fool.
You made a fool of Death.
I haven't read that one.
A lot of people just don't like the ending, and I think, or where the book goes, and there's no, if you haven't read it, you have to read it. It's just one of those books where
well, I know people were upset with the idea that book was being called a romance, because all my black girl romance readers are like, that is not a
lighthearted romance. I mean, for Akweke, it is lighthearted romance, but it is kind of like,
somebody said that's not a romance.
There's quite a bit of sex in the book.
Well, you can have sex in the book, but that's not the point. That's not the problem. The reason why they said it wasn't a romance, I think they said it wasn't a romance for other factors. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's
book discusses grief a lot.
When
but all that to say, I get the idea of maybe people being critical about a book because they don't necessarily like the trajectory of a character, or it's too much happening that they don't care for. And I think Memphis doesn't even give us enough to critically engage in that manner.
Yeah, it needs more pages.
Very flat.
Yeah, it needs more pages. It needs more. The thing is, she starts going up the hill and then she stops. Literally, she starts going up and then she stops. She doesn't take it all the way. And then what she does is then she compounds on top of what she's already thrown out as, a problem in the story. Another thing that is a problematic is the time jumping.
I thought it's a technique.
It's a technique, but this ain't it. I'm telling you, this ain't it.
I didn't mind. It just wasn't. I think if there was more care for the characters, the time, because The Prophets by Robert Jones, right? Goes back and forth across coastlines, but it's done with intention.
I love that book.
It's done with
but you can kind of see what he's doing in that book. In this book, what I don't like, I'm looking at the contents. So you have part 1, You have part 2 and you have part 3. So in part 1, you start 1995. So you have 1995 in 2 chapters, but with 2 different characters. Then you go back to 1978 with 2 characters. One of the ones that you just heard in 1995 and a new one. Okay? Then you go to 1995, 3 chapters in a row with three different people. Then you go to 1988 with 2 different people, and you go back to forward to 1995 with 2 different people. Then you move to part 2, and it gets even more complicated because then it starts in 1997, then it goes back to 1937, then it goes forward to 1943, then it goes forward again to 1997. I got exhausted with it, frankly speaking, because when you're going to do time jumps, that is, if you're doing a time jump because you want us to somehow understand, say for instance, 2 different people's reaction to the same thing at 2 different time periods, then you can't be jumping back and forth as frequently as that, because the reader is just going to get lost in the sauce, and the person is just going to be like, okay, forget that. When are we? Okay, 1995. Okay, whatever. Because you've jumped so many times, they can't follow anymore.
Yeah, and also the time jumping isn't resolving anything. Like, things are happening, but they're not. We're kind of, questions are not getting answered, and then everything kind of gets condensed into these 2. Are they still in high school?
Yeah.
Or like very young girls driving across
Yeah.
Tennessee to visit one's rapist,
Yeah.
and the other one doesn't even know the story. And then when you think that happened at 3,
Yeah, she was 3 or 4 years old. Yeah, 3 years old, I think. Yeah.
like that is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the white doctor told her that she wouldn't remember it.
And that's the most we get. We get all these time jumps. And it's just, it feels like a sweeping tale. I wanted to write a book that Oprah's book club could read.
I don't know if Oprah would get into this one, but this ain't sweeping enough for Oprah.
It's just, it's sweeping. It's like, the grandmother dying in the garden and just kind of like laying down and looking at the sky, and then Dawn with the dress that looks like fire. But who is Dawn?
Yeah.
Why is she living so
Yeah.
long? And why is she, what is the center of her world? We just get Dawn as this figure that's just like this mythical energy that has to exist because it's a book about Black women, and we need a mythical character, and that's a technique that I'm going to employ.
Yeah. And it's also, you have this kind of weird contrast between the women and the men, because the men are not nice men. The only one that is like a redeemable man is Myron, the grandfather that is not in the picture anymore. The man who became the first Black police officer on the police force in Memphis and then was subsequently killed by another white cop. He's the only one that was good. All the other Black men in the book are not great. So that makes it very problematic. And it's almost like it kind of reverberates this idea that Black women have to deal with quite a lot of things. Like they have to raise their children. They have to make the money. They have to do all of these things. And at some point in time, they have to acknowledge that they made mistakes and then try to rectify them, or at least try to break cycles, if you want. And that's like the part that she kind of sort of starts to talk about it, but she doesn't really go as far with it. Because both sisters have different issues. August has the son Derek, who is, rapes his cousin, and I think Derek is like 10 or something when this happens, or 8, something like that, 9 when it happens.
And it's almost explained as if the violence comes from his violent father.
Yes.
Who's this mystical character that we never get a name
No,
for.
he has no name, but we see that he is with his son, abusive things to him, and this is probably part of the reason why he's a bit messed up, and he winds up, of course.
To the point, about all the men being bad people. I mean, Toni Morrison, Alice. There's a era of Black women literature where men are terrible, like in The Bluest Eye.
Oh yeah.
Right? None of the men are good
Yeah.
people. But there isn't sort of like, I think there's, and Toni does kind of employ this technique, right, where you do get the background of what
That
leads
leads
these
up to the
men
person being that way.
down to being
Yeah.
horrible men.
Yeah.
But it's still done with a sort of care for Black. I think with Toni Morrison's writing is that she has a care for the everyday Black person.
Yeah.
That, you know, she wants you to see the natural magic
Yeah.
in existence of Black
Yeah.
people in America at a base
Yeah.
level. And she takes time to kind of, from a historical perspective, explain these backgrounds rather than just have like these men who are violent because one bad thing happened to
Yeah.
them and that explains it all.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not that simple. I mean, it's never that simple. It's never that cut and dry. But that's all we have to go on because that's all she gives us. You know, I can only just assume why Jax has become a Superman. I mean, he is literally punching his wife in the head, in the face. Like, and then he not only that, but he steps over her to leave. So it's even worse, you know, what we see when we see that. So we can only imagine, yeah, he got pretty messed up when he was away at war. And so he's come back now and he's like a lion in a cage and everything ticks him off. And so he's violent to his wife. So we're supposed to just accept that. And that's his excuse for being the way he is. And for Derek, we don't get that explanation though about the abuse until it's like towards the end of the book. It's like when you're 75% in, I think they give you that explanation, something about the dad abusing the kid, making him hold buckets of water and not moving. And, if he moves and drops the water, then he gets beaten and some other things happen as well. So we go pretty much the whole book just hating him, and worrying that something's going to happen, to Joan. And then there's also the level of no communication. So the younger sister doesn't even know what happened to her sister. Like, wow, like they're not communicating at all in this family, period. So,
and it's because I want to ask, like, what characters did you like? And when I think about that, I think like I didn't like the base of the women characters. I just wish if we're going to have these complex narratives about their life, that these women were developed more.
Yeah.
It's not implausible that there's a house where this trauma happens.
No, it's
and
not, because we've read about it before in other books.
We've experienced it in our real lives. Things get swept under the rug, but there's still a bit more tension that happens. Like, I don't know that I don't know. Like, what am I trying to project onto this book? Because I think maybe this is a good book to be turned into a TV series, because somebody could
take this and make it into a TV series, but they would have to do a lot of I feel like they could do a lot of the filling in parts that are not there. And it could be very good, because that's what it's missing. It's missing all of the why and how did we get there? Why and how did we get there? And like, I feel like writing it's a difficult exercise, contrary to what she thinks.
She's done writing camps and has a master's.
It's a difficult exercise. I mean, I've spoken to authors and they've all said it's not an easy exercise. So you have to really try things, and you have to also be willing to listen to readers, because like somebody said it the other day, I do this live on Instagram every Friday where we talk about what we're reading. And last Friday, somebody said, well, a lot of writers are not readers. I was like, this right here. That's the problem. Because writing is one thing and reading is another, because we're seeing the finished product, and then we're saying, well, wait, where is this? And why is that not like this? And, oh no, that's unbelievable. I don't believe it. That's one of the main things that that readers usually kind of like, if they cannot believe the fiction the way it is given out, if they can't really believe it, then they're not going to like it. They're automatically going to be critical of it, and they're going to be like, no, there's no way this person would do this after she had done that, you know? And that's what writers forget about. They forget about that aspect. They need beta readers. They need beta readers.
It's like, as Kiese Layman says, the art of revision.
Yep.
You know, like the need to revise your own work and to have a lens out and to be, as you're
Absolutely.
saying,
But you have to be open for
read.
that. Writers have to be open for that. And I'm not sure that's the case. Somebody, but we don't want her to get a show. Yeah, so I mean that's my take on it. I really wanted it to be, you know, something that I would love, but I mean, I read enough books to know this ain't the one. Nope.
So how far into the book did you get before you realized that
It wasn't the one? When I was like 50% in. Because when I was 50% in, I was like, why do I feel like I'm walking through quicksand? You know, like I'm moving, but I ain't going nowhere. You know? I would say I was halfway through and I was just like, girl, you better just suck it up and read this damn book and get this analysis
I read
going.
it sped up on Audible. I listened to it sped up on Audible, and so it took me to the ending. I kept thinking the next part was gonna like give me the juice.
Yeah, no. You know, usually books, they say once you can pick up a book in the bookstore and you can turn to like page 113, something like that. And you read that page, you read a couple pages after that, and you can kind of feel if that book is going to be something that is, you know, that is interesting, that is really going to, you know, hold your experience. But it's a short book, so it took me a while to figure it out that it wasn't, you know, that wasn't going to be the one. But I would say I was about halfway in, and I was just like, okay, because it was starting to feel long. You know, this is a book that's not even 300 pages, I don't think. And when you get a book like,
I guess that is a short
245 pages. If you read a 245 page book and you're 50% in and you're feeling like it's really long,
it did. Okay, it wasn't just me. It did feel long, and I listened to it sped up. And so when you kept saying short book, I'm thinking in my head,
it felt long.
That felt like a long 8 hours to listen to a book.
Yeah.
And I have the physical copy around here somewhere. It's probably buried under all
my
my
links, I got this physical copy they sent me, but it felt long for me. And that's when and then there were no answers coming, you know, like when an author starts writing a book and they start giving more and more problematics and they're not even answering any of them, not even one of them, you should be worried, because you can't have that many problematics and then try to finish the whole thing, answer all the problematics the last 20 pages of the book. Like, you can't do that. It's, you know, like speed through the last part of the book to answer all of the problems. That's not going to work. I mean, you're going to have to, you know, slow down with the problematics, maybe not put so many, and, you know, just kind of, you know, like a staircase kind of thing, and try to answer and try to fill in. How did we get here? Why are we doing these things? You know, kind of thing. Because even Miriam, I have big questions for her, because she's the one. She's the offspring from Hazel and Myron. So she's the one who had a very particular upbringing. Whereas her sister grew up with no father, because he was in the civil rights movement and then he wound up getting murdered. So she grew up without a father. So I was like asking the question, like, so how did Miriam, how did she learn how to parent the way she's parenting? It seemed like her mother parented in a different way, having to raise two daughters alone.
More communal. they had a more for them to become, August is a very communal minded person. Miriam gets isolated very quickly because of her marriage to Jax. But even like with Myron's passing, like the community just kind of pops up.
Yeah.
They pop up, when Derek does something wild, the community pops up. And it just is kind of like this mythical community that exists, but there's no.
Yeah, because we don't see it as a real entity. We just see it as spotting, like here and there. It's not like a thread through the story. It just pops up here and there. So that's why the parenting techniques of Miriam have me baffled, because we don't really see them. We only see the outcome. So we see that her and her husband are not getting along. We see that she feels very isolated as being the wife of a military man. So she's very isolated and alone. And she even says it. I didn't realize that marriage to Jax would be so lonely, kind of thing. And then she's having to raise 2 daughters practically on her own. But yet when her daughter is abused, it's almost like it's the test that she fails miserably when it happens. Like she doesn't know how to, she doesn't know how to pick the pieces up. And sadly, I mean, the time period and everything, she goes to this white doctor, and the white doctor, says, oh, she's too young, she won't remember it or anything. But then when she goes and moves back with her sister, entering the house, the daughter, first thing she does, she pees on herself. She's so afraid. As her mom's saying in her head, oh yeah, the doctor said she won't remember this. So then when I saw that, I was just really baffled by her parenting techniques and her relationship with her daughters, and then never ever saying anything to the youngest daughter about what happened to her sister. I mean, I don't know. There was just too many unanswered questions and things that just don't make sense. And I didn't like the woman with the freaking magic lady with her crystal ball or whatever the hell, her stones or whatever it was.
You didn't like Dawn?
No, I didn't like Dawn. I was like, Dawn she felt very cliche.
Dawn is just a character that's meant to yield emotion with little to no action. Dawn is a tool.
Yeah, she was a tool for sure. But I wasn't feeling her. I wasn't feeling her at all. Sorry.
Okay, we're going to close out here. My guy is breaking down. He is full on having.
He's breaking down. He's sad.
I think he might still be a little hungry. So we're going to get some food. But thank you so much for joining me on this discussion. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. If you're watching the replay, definitely it's at Brown Girl Reading on Instagram. And I told you should put it up on YouTube, because Instagram, when I searched her name and I searched the book, this Instagram doesn't populate. YouTube doesn't populate. And a lot of her stuff gets buried because, there was a big PR push for this book, and a lot of mainstream media and a lot of notable Black authors also co-signed the book. So.
Well, she was also nominated for the Women's Prize.
Yeah.
She got longlisted.
I mean, the technique is there, and I think a white reader is gonna a white reader is not gonna critique this book.
No, they're gonna love it. They're gonna think it's a great book.
Them to critique.
They all love it. They all love it.
Yeah.
Okay, get little baby something to eat.
Yeah, the syllabus for this is on sale on the book club website for $2.99. I will see y'all all for Parable of the Talents. That's what we're reading now.
Very good. Okay. Bye.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.